Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Viking Chats podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today by the superbly delicious Annalese Walmsley. Darling, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's time stamping this. It's almost Christmas, so almost time for some well-deserved holiday, which I'm looking forward to.
It's almost Christmas, but people will be listening to this after Christmas. This will be a post-Christmas drop.
That's fine.
So now, obviously, for those people living under a rock, Annalese, you're currently at Kotini.
I am, yes.
Cool. So tell me a little bit about what you get up to at the moment. What is Kotini? What is your kind of daily role look like?
Yeah, so I'm a sales director, but I also have a dab in the marketing team, working with the product team, evolving what we currently do as a proposition. So we are a digital onboarding platform that integrates into pretty much every CRM on the market now, launching Alto in the new year, which is exciting. And basically our product sort of replaces 4 or 5 different bits of tech that agents are using today to onboard vendors and buyers. So most agents have what we call
this is wrapping up a lot of the like AML stuff, KYC.
Yeah. Most agents are what I describe as having like a Frankenstein tech stack. So they'll do their contracts through this piece of tech. They'll do their IDAML through this provider. They will send out a PDF PIQ form, and they'll kind of do it in a really disjointed way. What Kotini does is it presents it to the vendor within one branded link. So they get a branded email, branded journey, and they do everything to get themselves on the market in that space. So they don't have to download any apps. They don't have to, fill in World War and Peace. They just go into that app, fill everything in, and then our CRM integrations allow us to push back all the documents, all the updates back to the agent. So basically it's from getting a listing, from an instruction all the way through to listing. So, agent presses one button to create a case, vendor gets their link, they fill it all in, and then they're ready to go on the market. So it's a really clever bit of tech. And to be honest, it's not difficult to sell. It's more about agents opening their doors to you and letting you show them what it is you do. 9 times out of 10, agents will go ahead and use it because they can see the benefit. And equally, it doesn't have to cost them a penny either. So they can pass that cost on to vendors, buyers, whoever they want to in the process.
And your platform allows them to do that, to kind of monetize it to a certain extent.
Yeah, so it's fully customizable on the payment side. So we do a lot of payment processing. We collect upfront payments, things like EPCs, stuff like that. And they can customize what they want to charge. So Kotini costs 49 quid for everything, all in per property. If an agent wants to charge £50 to vendors and 50 to buyers, they'll make £50 on every transaction.
Yeah, up to the agent and how they do that business.
Exactly. But there's still some agents out there that are scared to charge. So, but that's a story for another day, I think.
But yeah, I mean, look, we can circle back around to that. I wanted to talk a little bit more first about kind of your journey into the supplier space, because we had a bit of a chat about this before we hit record. So you started off in nurseries?
Yes, yeah.
A bit of sexy insurance.
Oh yes, very, very sexy.
And then you landed in the world of property, working for one of the biggest female names, I think, in agency, and definitely in lettings. Who was that?
It was the wonderful Glynis Frew from Hunters. Yeah, I was her PA, which meant I just did, again, a mix of everything. I was also the first person to ever organise the Hunters National Conference. So that was my little feather in my hat of that, to be honest, going out and getting sponsorship from suppliers, booking speakers, basically everything.
And what was that like coming into the world of agency without any kind of track record and coming in? Must have been quite interesting coming in as a PA in a high level without that kind of groundwork. I mean, I know several people who've kind of worked up to PA or EA. They've still kind of had that early journey of being an office administrator or something like that. What was that like, just coming kind of cold into property?
It was full on. So I was with Hunters when they were in their massive growth phase. You know, they were franchising. I was sat in
That was
Glynis'
still
office.
when Kevin Hollenrake was.
Yeah, John Waterhouse was still there. Kevin Hollenrake was there. You know, I was sitting in an office with me and Glynis. I remember it quite well. We were sort of sat next to each other. And then you had Andy Bushell, Carol, you had Carrie Alliston. They were all working in that same office. You know, it was intense. It was busy all the time, but I picked up a lot from the training stuff that Glynis used to do. So Glynis and Carol used to run the Hunters Training Academy. So I used to manage that, organize that, sit in on a lot of that training. So whilst I wasn't an agent, I was learning what agents did and how they did it.
Yeah, and it says I think a lot for a business. You know, a lot of the names you mentioned there. I mean, Carrie, I recorded an episode with her, which was the last one we released last Monday, and that was great, talking about her journey up through the Hunter ranks, and then, as so many seem to be doing at the moment, did the leap over to supplier with Barman. So you did stint with Glynis, and then I think I'm right in saying you went back to insurance for a little bit.
I did. I went back into insurance, but in a different guise. So when I first worked in insurance, I worked with Halifax, ISA, and investments with Aviva, which probably wasn't really a sensible idea, considering we spent most of our lunches in the pub and then we were handling people's money. But you know, it was fun. But I went to work for Hiscox, who were opening up a new flagship office in York. So if you've ever been to York, they've got this huge office with this, sounds really weird, but a huge rocket in it, like a genuine rocket inside the office. And they were looking for someone to come in and recruit and do recruitment open days, that type of stuff. So again, I was organizing all of that from an ops perspective and then supporting on a HR function as well. So obviously I did quite a bit of HR when I worked with Glynis as well. So I was able to transfer a lot of those skills to insurance. But to be honest, it was really boring. Loads of people try and tap me up to be a recruiter. And I'm like, I could do it with my eyes closed, but I don't enjoy it, and it's really boring.
Interesting. And then I think, all right, you got headhunted to come back into kind of the property supplier space. Is that right?
No. So from there, I was just about to get married. So this was back in 2014. So just about to get married. I was, you know, my daughter was coming to live with me. If you've ever listened to my other podcast, you'll know the story of that one. And I just wanted a quiet life. So I thought I'll just apply for like PA jobs, part-time, 16 hours a week type jobby. And I then applied to be Ian Preston's PA because I thought, you know what, I do quite like property. I want to get back into it, but not as an estate agent. So I applied to be his PA. I didn't get the job. Not because I wasn't good enough, by the way, but because...
No, I think you said he thought you'd be bored in the role.
He thought I'd be bored. So, you know, he said, look, I just don't think this is enough for you. Like, I'm quite a high energy person. And he said, I think this is just going to bore you. His PA, who he hired instead of me, is still there, by the way. So Hannah is lovely and she's brilliant, but she's just stuck through everything with them. So I didn't get that job, but at the time, Ian and James Preston, James Baker were invested in a business with Peter Knight. And that business was called Boomerang, which was a customer feedback, all about NPS. You know, we were doing telephone outbound calling, and he offered me a job as an operations manager. And to be honest, I was like, why not? Let's just give it a go. What's the worst that can happen?
Which is a really, really good mindset, because we do hear a lot, particularly with women in the workspace, that, you know, there's that self-filtering, that like, oh, I don't know, I haven't done it before.
Yeah,
you know.
well, there's that thing of people, like women will feel like they have to tick off every single box on a job application to put themselves forward, whereas men will do it's like 30% of it. If I can do,
women will go like, oh, I've only got 8 out of the 10 ideal skill sets, I'm not sure I'm right, and men will go, I've got 3.
Yeah.
Right.
That's my mentality, though. I've got quite masculine energy when it comes to things like that. You know, I think, you know, of everything that's happened in my life, I'm like, what's the worst that could happen? I fail and I move on and do something else. Like, I've got you know, I don't like taking big risks because I have a family and things like that. But it's not a big risk when you think there's always another job. If it doesn't work.
There is, and I think that's the thing. When you're a capable human being, you know, as long as you've got that faith in yourself, that self-confidence, and I think that is fundamentally what a lot of people lack. But yeah, like you said, I mean, I'm very much like you. Whenever an opportunity presents itself, you know, I will just kind of very quickly be like, what's the worst that can happen? That's really not that bad.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you look at the positives and it gets really exciting.
And you learn, you're always learning, whether it's bad stuff or good stuff. You're learning what you're good at, what you're bad at. Like there's never a downside to trying something different. Like that's what I see. I've kind of gathered so many different skill sets in the different types of jobs that I've had that have got me to where I am today. You know, if you'd have said to me in 2014, you will be working in PropTech, you'll be a sales director for a startup, it'll be your fourth or fifth startup and you'll love it, I'd have said, no, I just want a quiet life, you know, a few hours a week. And turns out I live anything but that. It's chaotic, but amazing.
Yeah.
But,
so sorry, I cut in. So you did Boomerang and then COVID did not do that business well.
It's not going now. It was still going when I left. I always like to plug that all of the tech businesses I have worked in are still going. I haven't killed any of them. They were, but unfortunately, yeah, it was not really a sustainable model at the time in terms of where the world was, you know, in terms of pricing, cost savings, increasing, you know, costs across everything. And it just kind of slowly died away. So I do still keep in touch with a lot of people that work there, though, SJ Taylor being one of them. So she was my boss before I left.
Nice. And then from there, you went to Xero?
I did, yeah. So that's when I got headhunted on. Ben Harris, I remember distinctly because I was on a hen do abroad when I got my first message from him. And I did reply. I might have had a few drinks, but I did reply. And I just thought it was really exciting. I thought it's a disruptor product. It's one of those products where agents are going to say we don't need it, but I'll convince them that they do. I'm very good at convincing people. Ask my husband.
It was an interesting space, wasn't it? Because when you had kind of Reposit that came out first, if I remember correctly, they were kind of.
It was Canopy. Canopy were first. Canopy had their zero deposit product. So before they were referencing, they were a deposit alternative.
So, funny story, and I forget the gentleman's name, but the guy who started Canopy.
Yeah.
Quite funny. I got invited to this entrepreneurs thing I used to go to, but it was quite cool. It was basically like you'd have 10 people in a room, and then you would have 3 to 5 people stand up and do a 10-minute presentation. And that could either be a startup idea or a problem you're having in your business.
Yeah.
Now, the fascinating thing was you'd have 10 or 15 people sat around a table who'd listened to it. You weren't allowed to tell anyone what you did until the end of the event.
So what are you doing? Just what problem you were solving, for example?
Well, the idea was they would always get a mixture of people in the room. They would try and make sure there was 1 or 2 people kind of in the relevant space, but they would get entrepreneurs from across different sectors. And the idea is that you would just get honest kind of general business feedback, rather than people kind of bumping their ego on you know, and you weren't allowed to say, oh, having worked in the space for 3 years, blah, 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 blah. You just had to give really unfiltered answers.
Yeah.
And it was a really, really interesting concept, actually, because you get some really fascinating bits of insight. But chap pitched Canopy, and yeah, a bit like you said now, you kind of pitched it, and I was kind of like, sounds like a solution to a problem that doesn't really exist.
But they are really popular, you know. If you look at, and I can say this because I've seen the stats, you know, if you genuinely present tenants with 2 options side by side of deposit or a deposit alternative, there is around 50% on average choose a deposit alternative. And it's a genuine stat, you know. And I know this because when we were at Flatfare, which was where I went after zero deposit, after they made me redundant during COVID, I'm not zero deposit. Yeah, it was then.
Yeah.
I went to Flatfare and they created this deposits product where they could present those options side by side, and the results were genuinely about 50% of tenants would actually choose it. It's more about the landlords not opting for it more so than tenants.
Yeah, and I think that another thing that killed it, right or wrong, was the tenant fee ban, right? Because a lot of, I mean, particularly with agencies like Xero, because they wrapped up a lot of the big agents as stakeholders pre-launch.
Yeah,
so
Cromwell's Countrywide, PFH,
which should have just been like overnight success, really. But then obviously the tenant fee ban hit, and everyone got very twitchy about what you could or couldn't. And
I think because it was optional,
as his choice is fine.
Yeah.
At that point, it was like you can't, in the
It
early
scared
days, it's like
agents.
you can't, ask tenants for anything. And
Well, I remember training agents at zero deposit. I've had zero deposit, so I had insurance and non-insurance type products. I've been on both sides of the fence. And I remember the last slide at my training session at zero deposit was like, you can't say this and you can't say that and you can't do this. So agents got to the end of the training thinking, oh, this is great. And then went, oh, but how do we talk about it? Because we can't say this and we can't say that. We can't recommend it. Like, it's a really protected space. Whereas then when I went to Flatfair, it's like, well, we're not insurance. So it's not FCA regulated. It's not.
that's the thing. Yeah. There are benefits to being FCA regulated, but it puts you in a very,
Well, I remember my interview with the then CEO, Franz. So Franz and Daniel, who were the original founders of Flatfair. And I just left zero deposit, and Mal McCallion got me an interview because he was there when I joined Flatfair. And I sat down with Franz and he said, would you go out and pitch agents our product that you've pitched zero deposit? And I told him I wouldn't. And I said, because I have integrity and I genuinely believe that zero deposit is a better product. I got the job. I don't know how, but I did, because I had integrity and I was not willing to go to my clients and say, oh, that great product that I told you was the best on the market. Well, I'm now working for their competitor and theirs is the best on the market. I never did that.
Yeah, I think for a good boss, that will resonate, right?
Mm.
And ultimately it's their job to convince you over time that the product is better.
And I did get convinced that it was better over time.
The supplier space can be quite incestuous at times, so you don't really want someone, and so is agency, as well. I mean, same in agency. When we interview people in agency, like we'll always ask people like how they found where they work now or where they worked before. And it never sits well where you have someone really kind of put the boot in to an agency that they've worked at, and it's like, but hold on, you basically told us it's a criminal enterprise, but you were there for 4 years.
You were part of it,
So which one is it? Like, if you were there for 6 months, we're like, Jesus Christ, and jumped ship, all good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I stayed at Flatfair the longest I've ever stayed anywhere in my career. I stayed there for 4 years.
Yeah.
And genuinely, I was the last person to be hired before COVID, and I was the only person still standing after COVID, with the business. And that was, they put their trust in me to kind of lead that sales front forward. And I only left because I was bored. I was like, I need a new challenge. I feel like I've done what I can. There's nothing, there wasn't at the time anything more exciting to come with Flatfair.
You got some really big wins for them, didn't you? You got them, and you did really well at getting them into the build to rent space, which was really where the early adoption came from. Because they were all about exploring different models and different experiences.
And it's easier. Build to rent is one landlord. That's the only landlord you have to convince. Whereas in the resi, if you've got a portfolio of 250, you've got to have 250 conversations. So it's a much easier to adopt in build to rent than it is in traditional agency.
Yeah. So obviously you did the whole NDO, deposit alternative kind of space done.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, you just kind of felt like you wanted a new challenge. So how did the role at Kotini come about?
So I joined LSL after leaving Homebox just over a year ago. It was a short stint. Let's just leave it there. It was a short stint. Not for me.
All job placements work out.
No.
For every other reason.
But there I left there, and Martin Alderton from LSL said to me, look, I think you'd be a really good fit for what we're trying to do in 2025. And that's when the LSL franchise sales director role came up. And at the time, I thought this is a really good space for me to be in. I think it'll be really interesting. What I didn't realize is that I'm just not a corporate girly. I am not a ask for permission kind of individual. I'm more of a ask for forgiveness rather than permission. And also
being given a bit of free rein just to kind of crack on and kind of be trusted to do your job
And they did impress
under your
me.
own initiative.
They did. And to be honest, the people I worked with there were great. It was just the pace. The pace was so slow. I just I couldn't motivate myself because I felt like everything was so slow and drawn out. And
off the back of 3 startups as well. I mean, startups tend to be a pretty exciting space where things get thrown at you, but things are happening fast and
and they change. You have one day you're working on this, the next day you're helping with marketing, you're building a new product or a service, and I missed that. It was like I felt a little bit, I think I've said this to somebody before, but like a star-shaped peg in a round hole. I was like just kind of trying to fit in, and I just didn't fit in. And I made a conscious decision pretty early on in that role that it wasn't for me.
You telling me quite early on that you were
so I did 6 months
there. It's good that you're self-aware. It's really important to, and I think it's also good for employers as well. We've hired people over the years with Base where we thought they were the right fit. It was pretty apparent early doors they weren't the right fit, but we didn't act on it fast enough, and neither did they. They weren't happy either. So it's really important, I think, to be true to yourself. And I've talked about this quite a bit. We spend so much time working.
We do so much time, and
much time working. There's nothing wrong with work being a bit hard, and there's nothing wrong with work, being tough at times. But I think there's got to be that passion. I think maybe saying enjoying work to some people sounds a bit. I don't know.
I think that you say passion is the right word. And I remember when I was at Boomerang, I was getting itchy feet and I was ready to leave, that kind of thing. And I got approached by a company it was a great salary. It was a company car. And I thought it was everything that I ever wanted, right? So I was like, look, shiny salary, company car, this is going to be great. And then my husband slapped me down and he went, right, Annalese. So he said, first of all, the company was called PHS. I don't know whether you're familiar with who PHS are.
Oh, they're the sanitary supplies company.
And he sat me down, Kristjan, and he said, do you think you could be passionate about selling sanitary bins? And I said, no. So I passed up on that job opportunity. But that's where I could have gone. If I was just chasing the money, which at that time, I was young, I could have done that. I could have just chased the salary. I wouldn't have been fulfilled in what I was doing, and I probably wouldn't have done as well in my career, because I find that if I'm not passionate about a product or service,
right?
God, yeah. And I would have been, I was traveling a lot with zero deposit, but at least I wouldn't have had sanitary bins in my boot.
Nice.
The company car might have been a van, you never know.
The glamour.
Just imagine me with marigolds and a
PHS branded outfits and everything. You could have been living the dream, you fool.
But you did, and that's why with Andy, I think it's great is that he will knock me back into the real world sometimes, going, look, babe,
have a partner that genuinely understands. It's really good to have that, because
But on Kotini, I actually got introduced to Kieran through Amy Shields from Smart Compliance. She was like, look, I just genuinely think you guys can meet. Kieran's looking for a sales director. He wants somebody high energy. And she's like, I think you'd be great. And literally met Kieran and Harvey and the team and just hit it off like almost instantly. And I was like, this is super exciting. It's a great product. But the problem you've got is that nobody knows who you are and what you do. Because I didn't know who you are. And if I don't know who you are, and I've been working in this space for a long time, you got a problem. You need awareness, what we need first. So we've spent the last 7 months building that. And now we've got, something like 1,300 LinkedIn followers. We've got a great, we don't have to be in rooms now for people to know what we do, which is huge strides.
Your marketing is really consistent. And I think that's a lot of it, right? Just be present, do the odd event, but on the socials, in the marketing, on the relevant industry articles.
I think I said to the guys when I joined, we need to be being talked about in rooms we're not in.
Yeah.
And that's the key message, really. It's like, well, we're a Kotini, why aren't they here? It's like, well, we don't need to be if we've got that kind of word of mouth now. So, I don't want to break our back on the event circuit. I've done that for so many years. I literally feel like I've been on a stand at EA Masters, will I have every year since it was the Sunday Times Awards and things like that. So I'm kind of like, we don't want to keep doing that because they're expensive as well.
Look, you and I have talked about stands. I mean, I have mixed feelings about stands. I mean, you need the stands at events to fund the events for the agent. So it's a really important part of the piece. And that kind of does raise your profile and like you said, does get people talking. But, you know, I'm still very dubious about the true value of those stands. I mean, like you said, you know, how many people turn up at an event unaware, totally unaware of a product that are going to walk away being like, yeah, we've signed or we're signing up next week. It happens, but they're fairy tales rather
There's
than...
also agent avoidance as well. You know, they don't want to be sold to, you know, agents don't go to these things to be sold to. Some do. Some want to go and see the services and things. Kerfuffle was a great example of that as an event because my initial thoughts, and I've told Whaley and I've told David and everybody, was they put us on a different floor, right? The suppliers were on a different floor to where all the conference was taking place. And I turned around and went, this is going to be shit because nobody's going to want to go and see the suppliers. But turns out what that ended up doing was promoting the individuals that genuinely were interested in speaking to us rather than those that were just giving us lip service because they wanted the swag, you know.
And that's it, you know. There's a lot of merch. You get the merch hunters doing the mad dashes in the
should have seen David Mintz last week at RAN. He was hilarious. He had like 3 bags full of merch and just running around grabbing landmark socks and all sorts of things.
He could literally just set a shopping list of this lot, couldn't he?
Exactly.
I mean, the contacts he's got, he could just be like, so Santa needs 2 Kotini mugs, 3 pairs of money penny socks.
Everyone thought we were a travel company when they saw us last week. I don't know why. I think it's because we've gone with our admin holiday theme. So some guy came over and was like, are you like a travel agent for estate agents? And I was like, no, but that could be a genuine idea, especially when you get to the end of the conference season. Yeah. I said if I'd had 10 holidays to sell last Thursday, I reckon I could have sold them in that room because everyone looked like exhausted from event season. It's the last one of the year. It's like, why don't you book a holiday? You know, I could have done that off the side of my stand.
So look, you and I have we've only got about 10 minutes left to live. So talking about conferences, which I love, we've just got to the end of conference season, as you mentioned. We had RAN last week, the last big hurrah of the year.
It was indeed.
Just about recovered. But you and I are both huge advocates of the event space and what it means, not just for suppliers, but for agents as well, you know, and I've spoken a lot about, for me, it's not so much about the talks on the stage. Like I'm probably interested in about 10% of the conversations that happen in stage legitimately. And for me, it's a lot more about the conversations in the room, you know, both as a supplier and as an agent, just catching up, shooting the breeze. And again, I've had some amazing chats this year. I'm gonna have to get Benji from Hatton Home on.
I had a lovely chat with him on Thursday night.
We've had a couple of belters. We had a really good chat at the Negs, all about collaboration, about how, you know, this exciting new era of agency isn't this like animalistic competition that it was 10 plus years ago.
It's like that in the supplier space now, though, isn't it?
I know, it's kind of always a little bit like that. And then we had another really interesting one at RAN, all about the balance of tech and people in business, and where that right balance is. So, but no, had a really good chat. But what I wanted to do, I'm waffling, I wanted to quickly pay a little bit of lip service to one of our joint favorite not conferences, the Women in Estate Agency.
Yes, yeah, it's do you know what, I've said this before and I'll say it again, probably one of the most inspirational conferences I'd ever attended. When I first attended the first one 3 years ago, it basically was the catalyst to everything that's happened in my life in 2025. So, you know, it's about real people. You know, I feel like, and I can say this because I go to a lot of these events, quite often it's the same people having the same sorts of conversations about the same things that you're hearing on podcasts, on webinars, but in a bigger room. What Women in Estate Agency did and do is they bring other voices, other areas into the conversation that don't get discussed at a traditional conference.
I think the interesting thing about it is it's an event for people in agency.
Yeah,
but it's not an event about agency.
exactly.
My feeling with the last, with the 3 they've put on, you could go and listen to that conference from any industry and you would walk away with pretty much just as much as you do.
I was going to say about taking my daughter.
There's some data, there's some data and analytics that to tie it into our industry, obviously, because it is for estate agents. But I think the thing that really blew my mind that first year, and like I said, really thinking about what I was saying about the fact that I'm not generally drawn to these events because of the talks that happen on stage. And that's because I find a lot of them are very samey. And it's all about, how can you boost your listings? How can you boost your fees? Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yes, people come up with new ideas, but it's the same repetition over again. And I also get frustrated because I'm like, all this information is out there. Anyone in this room, if they genuinely wanted to do something about it, could find this online and implement it themselves, getting told it on stage. And look, I know it's true about everything, but what genuinely blew my socks off that first year and what they've managed to retain so far is that thing that like I said, anyone from any industry could have been in there, but it was about the workplace. It was about empathy and understanding, and it was about the hidden struggles, and
it was stuff that you could genuinely apply as well to you or as an individual, some of the stuff. So one of the bits that I wrote about it on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, but one of the bits was, remember Amy Shields talked about her anxiety and how she deals with that. And I've got a very highly charged emotional 8-year-old at the moment who's really struggling with basically controlling her emotions and how she does that. And I passed that information on to her, so it's not just that I've used it or I've needed it. I've passed it on to my daughter in a time where she's feeling these big feelings, and other people's stories, even Vicky Biberis, when she did about the books and the story, things that she's learned in business. That's genuine stuff that you can take away and go, oh, I'm going to read that, or I'm going to check this resource out. You can do that, whereas I don't feel that you get that as much from any other I mean,
there's so much stuff that wouldn't get mentioned. I mean, some of the things that really struck me, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, it was quite a bit about the menopause. Which, in the last couple of years is finally, bizarrely, it's only taken like 50,000 years for people to talk about something that afflicts 51% of the population. But hey, finally got talked about. And as someone who's got a business partner who's gone through it and a wife who's in the peri, I mean, I didn't even know what the fucking perimenopause was before. I hadn't even heard that phrase. But that for me was so eye-opening, not just about the multitude of ways it affects people, but the gross kind of medical negligence around it,
and how it affects your business as well. If you've got a team of women working for you, or you've got an aging team as well, you need to know about these things. You need to be able to apply actual things to your business to help improve their way of life. And if you don't know it exists, how are you ever going to change it? So there's so much in there for that conference. The beatboxers, the flash mobs, just amazing. And I do feel, I think they had one at Negotiator. Who was it? The RAN conference where they had someone playing like a saxophone or something? It wasn't RAN.
I think that was the Negs.
The Negs, yes, suddenly just burst in. But I can see
that people are going to have it, because I think we were thinking about having a cool sax at March. And we're like, God damn it.
But you can see it's starting to trickle into other types of events, because people are seeing what works and what we all shout and rave about when we get home.
But I think there's some really interesting ones, like there's, some of the ones that resonated with me. Rachel
Hanneke Brookin.
Thank you. I always remember Hanneke. I can never remember the second part of the double barrel. Her one all about language, which was so powerful for me, working in a business with an LGBTQ business partner, where more often than not, more than half of our team have been part of that community. And even as someone who considers themselves, a very strong ally, it's really, there were some really interesting moments in there about how carelessness with words can totally unintentionally be really kind of hurtful, and it really that was really fascinating. And like I said, the other thing that's come through, and I think the conference is starting to having to find a slightly new approach for next year, but we've had some eye-opening and heartbreaking stories shared on the stage. I think it kind of inspired to open up to Russell and share your incredible story on the Two Russells podcast. And we won't delve too deep into that now. We definitely don't have time.
Definitely don't have time for that story.
But, I mean, you confided that story in me, I think, about a year before. And yeah, I mean, I've made some incredible friendships through the conference and through the supplier space, and it never ceases to astound me, the myriad of things that, I mean, look, we all go through, but the myriad of things that women go through that get swallowed and suppressed and kind of put down, partly because it's just too horrendous to keep reimagining and reliving through every day, but also because there's this shocking mindset of like, it happens to everyone. It's just kind of part of life. And and I think, some of those things, we're genuinely kind of mind-blowing, and it's really kind of reframed.
I think it gave people a platform to be human rather than just robot business people. There are so many people since my podcast and since that event that have talked to me about their problems, things that have happened to them in their lives. And there's one individual who actually contacted me, and because I was in touch with them and I didn't know what they were going through, and I said that because I was contacting them, I was checking in. There was one day she said that you called me and you genuinely saved my life, because that was the day that I was gonna end it, and that conference was the first time that I'd met that person. And we've evolved our friendship over the years since then. It was the first conference when I met Russell, and I told Russell my story, because it just moved me in a way that no other event, conversation, anything has ever done before.
So Carla was going to be kicking me out of the room. I've now just had a sign held up at the window that I no longer need to get kicked out of the room. So we can squeeze an extra few minutes, but I will let you get back to your working day soon before I get sent a salary bill by Kotini. Not be too long. So look, I mean, like I said, obviously I don't want to go too much down that path, but I think, I have found the stories shared by women on that stage the last 3 years mind-blowing at times, and I think if nothing else, it just as a man sat in that room, you can't help but just become more conscious and more aware of things you say and do unintentionally. It just causes you to just sometimes take a breath, take a step, and just think before you let something daft or you think might be funny fall out of your face. But I think also, as leaders, as bosses, as staff, as colleagues, it is an event aimed at women, but it is really, really important that there are men in the room.
Oh, absolutely.
And seriously, if you are a guy who is listening to this and you haven't yet been to the conference, or the not conference. Sorry, ladies.
Conference, yes.
If you've not been to the event yet, do yourself a favour and get your ass down there in March. I genuinely would be utterly astonished if anyone attended that conference and genuinely regretted going or thought it was a waste of their time and money. It's
not expensive. It really isn't, and you can do it in a day, really, a trip, because it ends at a reasonable hour, unless you want to do the after party.
I mean, you need to pay for the depository sponsored after party.
Oh, is you guys sponsoring it? Well, there we go. I'll definitely be there then.
Yeah,
the bar tab is on you.
We've been a supplier sponsor the last 3 years, but this year we've decided, or we got the opportunity, I would say, to sponsor the after party. And if anyone knows me, Anne and Carla, They know that we like a little bit of a party. So
there ain't no party like an after party.
Exactly, yeah, that felt like quite on brand. And then I'm sure there's the after party like last year.
Yeah.
So, but no, in all seriousness, you know, if you, man or woman, if you are listening to this and you haven't come to the WEA event,
yeah, you should
booking
be
your diary now. There's still some tickets left. I can't remember. It's in March. I can't off the top of my head.
It's always in my diary as soon as I get a whiff of a date.
I know it's March. When is it? I'm sure it's March.
It always is March. It's on the 6th. No, when is it? There we go. We're both frantically checking our diaries.
Frantically hopping around trying to find it in our diaries.
I could have just typed it in. That would have just
It's
been.
got to be quicker just to type in "We Are Not Conference," isn't it? Oh Lord!
It is the Thursday, the 5th of March.
Thursday, the 5th of March. There we go, people. So
You
heard, well, you didn't hear it here first because hopefully you've been seeing all the lovely little social posts that the ladies have been putting out about what is coming. But yeah, genuinely, if you haven't been, don't delay. Book your ticket in now. Book in your train ticket. Like Annalese said, you can do it in a day, but you know, if you've got the time and money, I would definitely recommend, if you're not a London local, book yourself a hotel room. And just make a bit of a day and an evening of it. But don't come expecting to figure out how to increase your fees above 1%. Don't come to find how to increase your valuation conversion rate. But do expect to walk out of that room with some new knowledge, about how, like I said, how to be a better colleague, manager, boss, owner, whatever it is, and whatever side of the sexual landscape you land on. I think it's just an amazing one, and I know I'm not going to give anything away. I know they're also trying some new things this year with what's happening with the kind of supplier space and stuff, you know, and again kind of doubling down on that it's not a conference vibe. And we're trying to come up with some fun shenanigans for the after party as well.
Always interesting seeing what you guys bring to the table in terms of we had Viking helmets and all sorts of things.
We're cogitating on fun frolics that
I like the one where you gave away the books as well. They were really good.
They were cool. Yeah, they were. There's some really good ones all about kind of female-backed investment and green investment. And there's some really cool stuff out there. So, and then also because we touched on it very briefly, you did your thing with the Two Russells podcast, and I think we touched on before you're going to be going back for kind of an anniversary.
I'm going to go back and do another one in the new year, so probably around the same time. I'll try not to tie it in for like the Women in Estate Agency conference this time, because I was exhausted for that event after doing that podcast the day before. However, we're going to do another podcast with them to talk about my journey since then and what has changed, because a lot has changed, a lot of big decisions have been made, and I'm in a much better place than I was this time last year. So I think it's more of I suppose the way I would position it is, this is why you should talk, not just do the talking. This is why it works.
I think that's a good place for us. We've only slightly run over the time that I've finished by, and anyway, I've been given carte blanche, but always an absolute pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you very much, Kristjan.
And we'll talk soon, darling.
Speak to you soon, darling. Bye.
Guys, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.